Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. All right, folks, Big Paul here today with another Anabolic Q&A. I've got some questions from my school membership site. Guys, if you want to join that, it's $30 a month. You can pop questions in there. I answer questions on there. I have some free resources, some courses, videos, and stuff for the members to watch. And it's a place where you can ask me questions and I'll respond to you if you just have stuff you want to talk about. Anyway, we got some good ones up today we're going to take a look at here in just a minute. I also wanted to remind you guys about the Science of Anabolics and PEDs e-course that Kurt Havens and I have put together. It is fantastic. It is up on my website if you want to take a look at it. Link is in the video description below. And we're going to get into all the questions in just 1 second. All right, first question we have here is from Matthew. And Matthew asks, what is the longest blast you have ever done? Do you feel like being on a certain length of time has diminishing returns if there are no negatives shown on the blood work? Oh God, longest blast I've ever done. It depends on the doses. I like if you're running like 400 or 500 milligrams a week, I don't know. I mean, you could probably sustain that for a long time and not have problems with it. Who knows? When I first got back into this, and I was working with Dr. Todd at the time. Dr. Todd doesn't do the whole blast and cruise thing. He likes running moderate doses for just basically perpetually. He doesn't really come down, but he doesn't run higher doses. And I don't remember what I was on. Something, maybe a gram or somewhere less than a gram. I remember at that time we were running very low testosterone and high DECA. I also ran like DECA only cycles at that point. I remember it was DECA and Anavar that I ran. And I think I was on that for about a year straight. Now, would I recommend that? Probably not. I played around with it, and what I have found that works the best, take this for what it's worth. I'm not saying that Dr. Todd's wrong here. It's just my opinion on this and what I've seen. I do better when I have periods of times when I get a little more aggressive with the doses, taper up and push up high, and make some gains, have a push where I push my body weight up to a certain point and then back off and let myself recover for a while. Somewhere in the 16 to 20 week range is what I found that works for me, and then I'll back off and cruise 8, 12, 16 weeks, something like that. I have essentially mostly been on a cruise. I had a false start cycle where I kind of got about a month and a half into it, and I just backed off. Since my show last July, I just started my cycle back up this week. I'll do a video about what I'm doing. I'm starting out pretty low, 600 test and 400. It were 200 Primo, 200 mass. It's a combination, a grand total. But honestly, I mean, if you were running something like 300 test and 200 mass run, you could probably get away with that for a really long time and have no problems. And yes, it's blood work. Once again, we got to remember poison is in the axiom in toxicology. Poison is in the dose and duration. So anything taken at high enough doses for a long enough period of time, even the most benign stuff can be poisonous. You can kill yourself with drinking too much water at one time. So keep in mind that there is some relative risk based on dose and duration here that we have to keep in mind when we're doing longer cycles. What I found for me is just somewhere around the 20-week mark, the wheels start to fall off. I stop making progress. You start feeling lethargic. You don't feel as good. Things kind of just come apart at that point. And at that time, it's time to back off and it is time to just give your body a rest. Go back down to TRT. Also, when I was talking to uh, Dr. Dean St. Mark, Dr. Dean, and this is just his theory or hypothesis, that there the body has a stem cell pool. And the higher you push the anabolics and the harder you're training and doing all these other things, the body is using the majority of its stem cell pool resources for hypertrophy, and it has nothing for repair of organs and to maintain health. And that's why you see that guys like sometimes will run big cycles and they're just fine, and then after a while, after being on for a long time, then organ health starts to decline, blood markers start to decline, and then you get into this situation where so much of the body's recovery resources have been pushed towards muscle repair and muscle growth. And maybe it makes sense to back off your training a little bit and back off the gear a little bit for a few months every year. You look at the guys, the bodybuilders that had the longest careers, the ones that had the most longevity in bodybuilding. Someone that comes to mind would be Dexter Jackson, and he was highly competitive until he was in his early 50s, 50. I don't remember exactly how old. I think he was 50 when he retired. But Dexter was well known for just taking months off the gym every year and just coming completely off PEDs completely, is what I've heard. Who knows if he really came off completely. My guess would be probably came down to some sort of low cruise dose or TRT plus, whatever the heck you want to call it. But at some point, something's got to give. You can't have the gas pedal mashed down to the floor all the time in the car until, or sooner or later, a gasket's going to blow. Something's going to blow. And if you give yourself breaks, you let your body heal, give it the opportunity to get back to homeostasis, I think overall you're going to have better results long term. In my cheat sheet that I have up on my website, if you want to check it out, it's $30. The PED cycle cheat sheet, I break down what a typical year looks like for me, with 16-week cut, 6 to 8 week cruise, and a 16-week bulk, 16 to 20, another 8 to 12-week cruise, and then this is how I break things down. I go through all of that, and I show people how all that works there. We also have some information on it in the Anabolics e-course. And that's all I've got on that one, folks. Luke asks, how important is the timing of your macronutrients when it comes to meals, or is it just better just to have, hit a macro target for the day? Is it better to have your meal structured where you have certain macronutrients at certain times of the day, or just get them in and it doesn't really matter? I have some thoughts on this. For most people, Gen Pop people that are just trying to get in shape, trying to lose a little bit of weight, meal timing and all that stuff probably doesn't make any difference. If you're trying to lose weight, it's really at the end of the day about net energy balance and being in a caloric deficit. And as long as you're in that caloric deficit, it doesn't really matter when you get your food in. Now, the exception, for those of us that want to be jacked and ripped, it does matter. And here's why. We have we have a situation here with nutrient timing around workouts, and a lot of people have heard have your nutrients around the workout. So here's why it's important to have carbs and amino acids stacked around the workouts. During the workout, there is going to be signaling that's going to cause increased uptake of carbohydrates and glycogen synthesis. Things like AMPK are going to cause GLUT4 translocation. That's going to increase the sensitivity to insulin and increase carb uptake. In fact, if I recall correctly, with GLUT4 transport, insulin doesn't need to be present, and you can have increased glucose uptake and glycogen synthesis during the workout and in a certain window post-workout. I don't remember what it is, like an hour or two post-workout. Probably 2 hours. So it would make sense during that time period to have carbohydrates in place, carbohydrates during the workout, intra-workout. I probably would take some amino acids during the workout and a healthy carbohydrate intake post-workout. I like to have carbohydrates that are easily digested. You don't want to be eating simple carbohydrates that are going to be, complex carbohydrates that are going to be digesting for hours on end. And it ends up, you're not getting through all that for like 3 hours through your 3 hours post-workout. If you eat a bucket of oatmeal or brown rice or something, it would make more sense to eat some cereal, have a Gatorade during your intra-workout with some amino acids in it, or some sort of intra-workout drink like Troponin Nutrition. They have their the one that I use. It's field rations that they have that has highly branched cyclic dextrin in it and some amino acids, something like that. And then post-workout, you want to probably raisin chicken. That's usually what my go-to. I usually like to keep the fats lower around the workout to, one, because I'm using insulin and I don't want to force fat storage with the insulin while I am, during that window. And plus, it just seems the carbs move faster when you're not having fats with them. So I would, for a bodybuilder, for an athlete, yes, it does make a difference to have macronutrient timing around your workout. The rest of the day probably doesn't really fucking matter. As long as you're getting a steady stream of protein in to sustain to sustain amino acids in the body, so we can have muscle protein synthesis. I would probably try to eat some sort of protein every 3 to 4 hours. Do you need to eat 6 meals? Probably not. You could probably get away with 3 or 4 larger meals if you wanted to. It just gets harder to eat that, but I find that getting the 5 to 6 meals in that most bodybuilders do seems to work well. It's a tried and true method that has stood the test of time, so just do that. Next one here is from Brian. This is sort of similar to the question earlier. Could you run a low-dose Primo and test cycle forever, basically, if your blood work looked good? Yeah, probably. Why, I don't see why not. Are you taking years off your life? Who knows? We don't know. I mean, once again, goes back to the thing I talked about before. Dose, duration, or what makes something toxic. We think about it in terms of alcohol. We know alcohol is a substance that is toxic to the body. But having a glass of wine every day probably is not going to take years off your life. Probably not. We can't say for sure. Look, I'm not encouraging drinking alcohol. I think the World Health Organization recently said that there is really no safe dose of alcohol, but people have lived for thousands of years having a glass of wine every day. I don't drink that often. Maybe on the weekend I'll have a glass of something with usually a beer or a cocktail or something with dinner. But look, it's we're putting it in that terms. Having a cycle of Primo and tests, let's say 300 tests, 200 Primo, running that 365 days a year. That's probably the equivalent of having a glass of wine every day, I would guess. Maybe safer. Honestly, when I am done with bodybuilding, I am going to do what I'm going to call the old guy bodybuilder cycle. I probably will run something like 300 tests, 5 or 6 units of GH, and maybe like a couple 100 milligrams of Masteron, and I'll probably do it year round. Maybe I'll come down to TRT here, and just stay on that for periods of time. I don't know. That's what I've been doing here recently. And then just do maybe like a little small blast. I'm talking about 600-700 milligrams total once a year, just to look good for the summer, something like that. That's going to be my old guy retirement cycle when I'm done with bodybuilding. And I think you're pretty safe with the stuff that's bioidentical, test, GH, even a little insulin here and there. Not that I'm telling you to do insulin. People are too stupid to use insulin because it takes math to do it, and that's why people get themselves in trouble. But bioidentical hormones are mostly going to be tolerated well by the body. I find that Primo and Masteron are really well tolerated. Other than some HDL suppression, that is something that you would have to keep an eye on long term. probably not a big deal. You could make up with that for that by just taking in more omega-3s. If you get enough omega-3s in and you keep your LDL low, it probably is not a big deal. All right, next question here from the school member site. We have from Scott Brinkman. Scott asks, would it be better to break your weekly gear amount down into daily injections, or could it be equally effective to pin the same amount 2 or 3 times a week? Would this also apply to growth hormone as well, say 6 units a day versus 18 units every third day? There's the microdosing crowd out there. You can look, if you want to go to Steroid Plotter, you can see the curve of the drugs and how they work. There's a website called Steroid Plotter and how you have peaks and dips. I used to do daily injections, and now I've kind of come back full circle on this and just do them 2 or 3 times a week, mainly just because I get tired of taking shots all the time. You're going to have more stable hormone levels. That part is true. But the trade-off is it's going to be more scar tissue for more injections. There does come a time when you're a bodybuilder, a competitive bodybuilder, when the volume of injections that you're taking just becomes too much and that you have to break it up into daily shots. Guys taking 2.5, 3 grams of gear a week, now you're going to be taking 2-3 cc's a day of stuff. So you're going to have to do that. The half-lives on most of the stuff that we run, enanthate, cypionate, I mean, we're talking a week. So really, you could probably get away with once a week and be okay. You're going to have more peaks and dips. I will say this with testosterone, in talking with Kurt, Kurt is anti the more frequent injections, and I understand his logic behind it, and I'm kind of getting more on board with that myself. The one exception would be maybe testosterone is if you're a high estrogen converter. If you're somebody who really converts estrogen heavily, there does seem to be some benefit to doing smaller daily injections. That seems to lower DHT and estradiol conversion, mostly estradiol conversion. I think DHT conversion sad, sorry, so I misspoke there. But estradiol conversion seems to be lower when you break the shots out more frequently. So if you have trouble controlling your estrogen and you want to avoid taking an AI, that is an option. For the rest of it just really depends on doses. Right now, I am doing my shots Monday and Thursday. That's what I have been doing. When I was running my bodybuilding TRT for the last however many months, I was running 150 tests Monday, 150 Thursday. And now that I've up to 600 tests, I'm doing 300 Monday, 300 Thursday. That's what I've been doing here lately. So that's been my approach. After a while, your skin starts to, when you poke through into the muscle, it starts to feel like stabbing into a piece of sandpaper because there's so much scar tissue going on. That's not good either. So I don't know that the more frequent injections is worth the additional scar tissue unless you're having some sort of estradiol conversion problems. Oh, and regarding the GH, that portion of it, I don't see a benefit for running high. Maybe there could be a benefit. You might get more of a spike in IGF-1 if you were running that higher dose, but I've never heard of anybody doing that. GH has a shorter half-life, so it is something like a 6 to 8 hour half-life. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to take a look. So really, GH, there could be an argument to take it multiple times a day. I used to do that. I don't anymore. I take a single bolus at night, but GH probably should be taken daily. If you look at the prescription recommendations, the way they recommend taking it on the way the drug was designed, the Serostim, it's 18 units per day is what HIV patients take. I'm not saying you should take 18 units a day, but it's done daily at night, single bolus injection of 18 units of GH. All right, next question I got here from Jason. Jason said, your clients who are obese, 30% body fat or more, should they avoid using GH or consume lower carbs due to the potential insulin-resistant issues? What is your strategy for such clients? I mean, man, most people that come to me that are that obese, I mean, I think GH is going to help with lipolysis. I would, if they were going to take GH, probably just run a low dose, couple units, replacement dose would be fine, and get on some TRT. Honestly, somebody like that, really, if I had a man, come to me, I would just probably send him to a TRT clinic and let them handle that aspect of it. Me personally, let's say if I let myself go and got really fat again, like I did in my 30s, and this is the protocol that I ran when I came back, I'd run a couple 100 milligrams of test and a couple units of GH. GH is going to help with lipolysis and help you with recovery, help you just feel better. Honestly, I have never seen anybody running less than 5 units of GH that's had an issue with insulin resistance. I just have not seen it. It's it's not to say that it can't happen, but I haven't seen people have insulin resistance problems with GH at that dose. Now, if you're running 10 plus units, it's a possibility. Even then, guys that are in shape, I really just, if you're in shape, if you're eating healthy and you're working out, I just have not seen the insulin resistance thing be an issue with growth hormone. It's very uncommon, I would say. Now, guys that are in the off season, that are pushing the off season really long time, eating a bunch of carbs, they end up taking a bunch of insulin, things like that. Sometimes there can be some insulin resistance in that situation, but that's just from pushing so many carbs. More insulin is going to lead to more insulin resistance. More so, that's more so a problem than taking the GH. Guys, somebody that's obese that's going to be dieting down, in all likelihood, they're not going to be eating that many carbs anyway. So their risk of insulin resistance is probably going to improve as they lose weight, even while taking growth hormone. All right, next question I have here. I get this one frequently. What ratio of Primo would you take with your test to keep your estrogen in balance? This is the next one I've got here. It really depends from person to person. I have seen some people who take Primo, even small amounts, and their estrogen gets absolutely buried. They have no estradiol conversion whatsoever. They, end up with a super low estrogen, and then other people can run it at equal amounts or even higher than their testosterone and not have a problem. What I have found that works for the broadest swath of people, and what works for me, I like running my Primo dose somewhere in the 60 to 70% range, in that ballpark, not exactly, 2 to 3, 2 to 3 ratio of testosterone to GH, somewhere in that ballpark. Like right now, I'm running 300 milligrams of test, 200, well, really, it's 100 milligrams, 200 milligrams of a combo of Primo and Masteron 2 times a week. So it's 300 and 200. That's the setup that I have right now. I found for me that I feel the best on that. I've talked to quite a few people that I've worked with. They say that they feel the best on that ratio. That's typically where I would start. And then you can adjust from there and see what happens. If you find that your estrogen gets crushed, then you can pull it down or increase the testosterone, one or the other. If it's working great, then just leave it alone. If you need a little bit more, you can add a little bit more. But that's typically what I've seen that works well. Next question is from Jared. He asks, what are your thoughts on taking insulin on a high day while using a GLP-1? Well, my friend, I have some firsthand experience with this. I've been playing around with a GLP-1. I might add that I am a diabetic, type 1B diabetic. I have pancreatic insufficiency, so my body does not make enough insulin. I started retatrutide about 2 weeks ago. My first dose was 1 milligram. I've gone up to 1.5 milligram, which is really a baby dose for retatrutide. I wanted to mainly see how it affected my blood glucose levels and if it would improve my pancreatic insufficiency. And so far, so good. Seems like it's really helping things out. What I have seen so far, I did a high day this past Friday. I normally run, I as a type 1B diabetic, I take Lantus every day. I find sometimes on contest prep that I need to drop the Lantus. If I'm running a zero carb day, I don't need the Lantus. If I'm running a higher carb day, I will need some rapid acting insulin alongside the Lantus to help. That's not saying that you should take that, but typical protocol that I would have, I will do something like 150 grams of carbs with each meal, and I have my Humalog with every other meal because I'm eating 6 meals on that day. Humalog, it just depends on how your body metabolizes. It lasts something like 2.5 to 3 hours, up to 5 hours. So it still can be present when you go to that second meal. And what I found is that every other meal seems to work well for me. What happened this past Friday, I had 150 grams of carbs. I cut the insulin dose down lower. Usually I do something like 10 units with 150 grams of carbs. If you're non-diabetic, you could probably go half of that. And what I did this week is I went a little more conservative because I was using the GLP-1. I woke up, my fasted glucose was at 84 or something like that. It's normally in the high 90s with me, with being a diabetic. I took 5 units of insulin, ate 150 grams of carb. 30 minutes later, I was hypo. Well, probably an hour later, I was hypo. It hit me about an hour later. I've been hypo so many times being diabetic. I know what it feels like when it's coming on. I can tell. Start getting shaky and hungry, and I can feel it coming on. And I was like, oh fuck, I need to get some food in me right now. So I drank some orange juice. I did not use insulin the rest of the day that day, and my glucose levels stayed perfectly in line. That is a mistake I think a lot of times guys make when they start playing around with insulin, is they try to force the insulin. They get their mindset on a certain dose when really the insulin should match your carb intake and your glucose levels. You let your glucose levels dictate the need for insulin. So for example, if you're going hypo, clearly you do not need to add additional exogenous insulin to deal with the carbohydrates that you're taking in. Your body is utilizing them properly and disposing of them properly, and taking additional insulin is just going to make you go hypo, and you're going to have to eat more carbs to keep up with the insulin, and then you get into this vicious spiral where you overdo it and you end up making yourself fat. So I have a prescribed amount of carbs that I take during the day. I take my blood glucose levels, and then I let that dictate the need for insulin. So long story short, be really careful with the GLP-1. I think their advice is that just don't even use it unless you're diabetic. Probably for most people, if you're taking a GLP-1, it's probably a good idea to stay away from using insulin, period. All right, folks, that's all I've got for you on this one. I really appreciate each and every one of you. If you want to get your questions in, you can go be a member of the Anabolics, Anabolic Bodybuilding school site. I have a link to it in the members community. I have a link to it in the video description below. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for your support. It means so much to me. I will be at the Arnold, by the way, the Arnold in 4 weeks, I guess, in Columbus, Ohio. We have a booth, Chase and I, and Kurt. We're going to be all sharing a booth together and meeting up with people that are from our audience. So if you want to come shake my hand, talk to me. I will be there at the Arnold Expo. Looking forward to meeting everybody. Take care. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.